So I cheated a little bit on this review for Vampire the Masquerade Redemption. Normally, I whip these reviews up based solely on my own experience playing the game in a total vacuum, without a shred of research or watching other reviews, but I knew there was a lot about this game that I was completely clueless on. Like, for instance, as is the case with a lot of video games, Redemption was based on a tabletop RPG, which was itself part of a larger series of tabletop games called The World of Darkness, based in an alternate gothic reality loaded with the surprise, surprise, uber cool undead, monsters from classic horror tales, and supernatural beings. Apparently, Vampire the Masquerade was the second best-selling tabletop RPG of all time after Dungeons & Dragons, which is quite an accomplishment if you ask me, and it even had a TV series based on it called Kindred the Embrace. Now, it was short-lived, of course, but hey, it's something. And it wouldn't surprise me if it also influenced film series like Underworld as well. Anyway, the point is there's a whole lot more pedigree behind this video game than I was aware of initially. As I mentioned in the first installment of this gaming series, I missed this one back in the day. So I'm kind of playing catch up, and I want to get up to speed as best I can before starting Bloodlines, the next installment. Hence the sniffing around online. There is so much story here, to put it plainly, and it is dripping with references and connections to biblical scripture, as well as mythical folklore and European legends. It was way too much story to go into in depth in the first installment of the video game series, so I think developers were relying pretty heavily on the assumption that you as a gamer had played the tabletop version, and were already steeped in its canon. I obviously was not, and got quickly bewildered by all the Cainite factions and allegiances and leaders and such, but that is part of the charm of this game, for me anyway. You know you are entering a world which is as complex as the real one, and thankfully devs gave you the familiar age-old quest of being the fallen hero who must restore his honor and rescue the woman he loves if you didn't want to immerse yourself in all that lore. You're Kristoff, and Aneska's in trouble. And that's all you really need to know in the end, despite all the Tzimisce and Nosferatu and Tremere goons who come after you constantly, and their convoluted reasons for doing so. The deeper mythology is there if you're interested, but ignorance will not keep you from enjoying the game. I'm one of those people who can't help himself, however, so I'm likely going to do a deep dive in the coming months, because the scope of this game is grand to an unimaginable degree. It takes you all the way from the time of Cain and Abel, through the Crusades, to modern-day New York City. And it makes you constantly aware of the fact that Kristoff's struggle is merely the tip of an awesome iceberg of warring Cainite characters and clans. His is but a drop in an immeasurable sea of fable and legend. All that highfalutin praise aside, let's get to my thoughts on this game, which might be a bit scattered and disorganized as usual with my reviews, but hopefully it'll be worth your time, dear viewer. First off, I really like when a game teaches me something, especially facts about antiquity. Redemption expanded my vocabulary. Maybe that seems minor, but I did not know what a reliquary or a chantry was until I played this game. But they are cool enough sounding terms that I want to try to hold on to them, even though there obviously won't be much of a chance to work them into regular conversations without normies thinking there's something seriously wrong with me. Beyond teaching me little words here and there, it taught me some basic Bible lessons that somehow escaped me all these years. The most glaring of which is that after the slaying of Abel and the ground drinking Abel's blood in, the earth would no longer bear fruit for Cain, in essence forever putting him at the mercy of the children of Abel for his sustenance. And how cool of a twist does this game put on that legend? It's really the core germ or kernel from which Redemption's entire world blossoms into something compelling and engaging, something in which you can fully immerse yourself. The children of Cain bear his curse and must feed off the children of Abel for all eternity, accent on the feeding off part, of course. And I'm slightly embarrassed to admit that I did not know there were crusades against the pagans of Northern Europe. The crusades in my mind were always campaigns against Muslims in the Holy Land until playing this game. That's why the word pagan in the intro cutscene caught me off guard, if you'll remember, if you watched the series. And I thought it was some way for devs to avoid courting the standard controversy that always seems to come along with portraying the Crusades. People always gripe about them and how evil they were and so on. Now, I suppose you can still claim it's a bit of a cop-out to incorporate the much lesser-known pagan Crusades versus the standard ones to Jerusalem, but I personally don't mind keeping this tale more in-house, so to speak, and strictly amongst Europeans. It adds to the Gothic charm of it all. And it is rather irritating, to me anyway, that so much attention is given to the church's forays into the East, while what it perpetrated against white European pagans to the north goes largely unnoticed and untaught in schools. There's obviously a ton of racial and political will and bias behind all of that, but that's obviously well beyond the scope of this review. Suffice to say, I am rather pleased Redemption devs took it up as part of the storyline for this game, and I'm happy they educated me in the process. As far as gameplay itself goes, well, let's face it, this is quite a wonky and dated point-and-click adventure. It's not terrible or impossible to enjoy or anything, but it's obviously antiquated and a product of the technology of the time. It was also sort of right at the cusp of open-world gaming becoming popular, so devs did their best to make it seem like you could go anywhere and do anything. But all things considered, this is a fairly linear game. You can't travel to Vienna until you finish your Prague quests. New York is not available to you until you're done in London, and so on. Sure, you can roam around those individual cities as much as you like, one at a time, but that's clearly not what open-world gaming truly is. So the linear dungeon grind looms large in this game, and it probably will turn a lot of people off. I don't mind it so much. And for loot-obsessed gamers like me, being able to walk the abyss to get back to merchants and stashes was huge. I might have bailed on this game had that feature been absent. Yeah, I know, I have serious OCD loot issues. Shut it. The combat system is probably where I take the most issue with this game, and it gets back to a common gripe I have with a lot of games. I know everyone, or at least many gamers, probably the majority, absolutely hate turn-based combat, like the kind the Wizardry series employed. Personally, I don't mind it because it gives me fine-grained control, which I like. I mean, all things told, I guess I enjoy the more fast-paced, action-packed combat of something like The Witcher 3, if it's even fair to compare something as advanced as that game to a turn-of-the-century release. But the combat in Redemption really did not work for me. Mostly because, as mentioned, I'm a control freak when it comes to combat and battles in the games I play. If you watched my Romance of the Three Kingdoms 13 review, you know how much I hated not being able to control my general's decisions in battles where my ruler did not participate. I got the same damn irritating feeling here with Redemption. My party members kept choosing unnecessary combat tactics, like casting fireballs and Cloak the Gathering spells, when fighting one damn hopper or a ghoul rat, and wasting a ton of blood as a consequence. Maybe there was a combat setting somewhere in this game for your party members to prefer one style of attack over another, but if so, I totally missed it. And the ability to control your party members' combat choices certainly wasn't beyond the gaming tech of the time, because you can consider another point-and-click IP from this era that I'm playing right now, Baldur's Gate. I have my issues with its combat system as well, but it gives me much more control over party members' combat choices than Redemption did. So the frustration of my party members constantly going rogue and opting for nonsensical tactics got on my nerves, if I'm being honest, and it contributed to me kind of giving up on ever grasping the magic or spell casting side of the game. I'm not really entirely certain I even understand how leveling up your spells works after finishing the game. Now, I'm pretty sure that the higher you go with something like Cloak the Gathering, the longer it will last, the longer the duration of the spell. And I imagine allocating experience points to something like Fireball increases its power or its damage, but is there less of a hit on your blood pool? Or do you use less blood when you use the spell after leveling it? I don't know. And there's so much going on during combat that you really can't keep an eye on details like your blood pool dropping and by how much. Mostly you're struggling to get the mouse arrow hovering over the right pixel to either move to a certain spot, heal, or attack before you die. So I kind of gave up on all but a superficial awareness of magic in this game, and that's why I relied so heavily on the rocket launcher to defeat the final boss at the end. It's kind of a shame because I have a vague sense that magical proficiency would have helped me move beyond my preferred tactic of thinning the enemy herd one at a time and slowing down gameplay and progress in the game fairly dramatically. I might have been able to engage many enemies at once much more often than I dared to risk. But the point-and-click combat was just a bit too hectic and nerve-wracking to be able to focus on effective spellcasting and decision-making to any significant degree. And being a blood pool miser didn't help me much in that regard either. So part of this is on me as a gamer, my foibles and faux pas and annoying characteristics as a gamer. My biggest disappointment with this game, however, was the ending, and specifically the lack of user input or choices in deciding the outcome. Now, having said that, I think it was the best and most logical ending you could have gotten, but it seemed forced and somewhat anticlimactic. I can't remember how many games back then had alternate endings or alternate choices. Probably not many, but I seriously expected to have the option of letting Aneska go or letting her perish as a pawn of corrupt Cainite powers beyond her mortal control rather than turning her into a vampire. Think about it. It's really not an easy decision for Kristoff, who, you know, she's his angel. She's the love of his life, right? And there are moral pitfalls no matter what choice he makes. If he lets her die, he lets go of his one true chance at happiness now as a being cursed to eternal damnation. But if he selfishly chooses to keep his one true love with him, he curses her to that same eternal damnation. He subjects cherished Aneska to the curse of Cain. I think the static ending cheapens his moral dilemma and the build-up to it you seem to have throughout the game. Now, it may sound like I'm trashing redemption by saying this, but I just want to remind you, dear viewer, that I totally get the technical limitations of the time and the ever-present pressure to finish a project that all coders experience. And frankly, assuming they could not deliver a choose-your-own-adventure style ending for any number of reasons, they obviously chose the most appealing ending for the most people, in my humble opinion. No one but a few spurgs like me would have been happy with Kristoff choosing to spend eternity without Aneska. I get it. But ultimately, I think that is the course I would have chosen for Kristoff, as dismal as it may seem to be, to let her die and avoid being cursed forever like him. Kristoff is a man of high principles and virtue, and I feel selfishly turning Aneska into a vampire, like him, violates some essential part of his noble nature. He was a knight of the Crusades, after all. Alright everyone, that's another review under my belt. I got a lot more games to play before releasing the next one, so farewell for now, and I will see you in the next upload.